The Highway of Lost Souls. The rain didn't just fall, it assaulted the windshield, blurring the world into a smear of oil and charcoal. Elias gripped the wheel until his knuckles turned the color of old bone, his eyes burning from hours of staring into the high beams. It was the witching hour, that dead space between night and morning, where reality wears thin. The radio had long since dissolved into static, leaving him with only the rhythmic thump-thump of the wipers, like a slow, dying heartbeat. He thought he was just tired, just looking for a shortcut home. He didn't know he had already turned onto a road that didn't appear on any map. Then, through the deluge, he saw her, a pale figure standing unmoving on the shoulder, waiting for a ride that would cost him his soul.
Chapter 1: The Midnight Hitchhiker. The Honda Civic shuddered as Elias eased his foot onto the brake. The tires hissed against the slick asphalt, hydroplaning for a terrifying fraction of a second before biting into the road. He pulled onto the gravel shoulder, the headlights cutting a cone of illumination through the deluge. She was standing right at the edge of the light, unblinking. She wore a sundress that might have been yellow once, now stained the color of dirty dishwater by the rain and mud. Her hair, long and matted, plastered against her face like black seaweed. She didn't raise a thumb, she didn't wave. She just stood there, staring into the high beams with a vacancy that made the hair on Elias's arms stand rigid. "Idiot," Elias muttered to himself, his hand hovering over the gear shift. "Just keep driving. Don't be the guy in the horror movie." But he was already the guy. He was tired, lost, and the humanity in him, the part that hadn't yet been eroded by 12 hours of driving, wouldn't let him leave a young woman stranded in a storm like this. He unlocked the doors. The sound was a loud thud in the quiet cabin. She didn't go for the passenger door. Instead, she drifted toward the back, moving with a fluid, gliding motion that seemed at odds with the wind whipping around her. The rear door creaked open, admitting the roar of the storm and a gust of freezing air that smelled of ozone and damp earth. "Thanks," she whispered. Her voice was brittle, like dry leaves crushing underfoot. "Where are you headed?" Elias asked, eyeing her in the rearview mirror. He turned the heat up, blasting the vents. "Forward," she said. She sat perfectly still in the middle of the back seat, hands folded in her lap. She wasn't shivering. Elias merged back onto the highway. The car felt heavier, the engine whining a little louder than usual. Nasty night to be out walking. Car trouble? Something like that. He glanced at the mirror again. Shadows pooled in her eye sockets, making it impossible to see her gaze. The strange thing was the water. She was soaking wet, dripping, yet he didn't hear the usual drip-drip onto the upholstery. She was just damp silence. "I can take you as far as the interstate," Elias offered, his eyes flicking back to the road. The windshield wipers slashed back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the rain. "The interstate is closed," she murmured. Elias frowned. "Closed?" My GPS didn't say anything about a closure. Not yet. A chill crawled up Elias's spine, settling at the base of his neck. He reached for the radio, needing noise, needing something other than the rhythmic slapping of the wipers and her shallow breathing. He turned the dial. Static. He turned it again. More static, but this time laced with a high-pitched whine that made his teeth ache. He snapped the radio off. "You have a camera," she stated. It wasn't a question. Elias glanced at the dual-lens dash cam mounted on his windshield, one lens facing the road, the other facing the cabin. He drove for a rideshare app on the weekends. The camera was for liability. Drunks, pukers,
Liars. Yeah, Elias said, trying to keep his voice light. Safety first. Crazy world out there. Cameras see what eyes forget, she said. The atmosphere in the car shifted. The air grew heavy, pressurized, popping his ears. Elias gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He suddenly felt like an intruder in his own vehicle. He wanted her out. He didn't care about the rain anymore. He just wanted the suffocating weight in the back seat to be gone. Stop here, she commanded. Elias blinked. They were in the middle of a dense stretch of forest. No lights, no houses, just a wall of pines looming on either side of the road like jagged teeth. Here? Lady, there's nothing out there. Stop. He slammed on the brakes, perhaps a little too hard. The car skidded to a halt on the shoulder. Before the car had even fully stopped rocking, the back door opened. The storm roared in again. Be careful, Elias, she whispered. He froze. He hadn't told her his name. By the time he whipped his head around, the back door was shut. He peered out the window, squinting into the darkness. Nothing. The rain slashed vertically, bouncing off the pavement. She was gone, vanished into the woods, or swallowed by the night. It didn't matter. She was gone. Jesus. Elias exhaled, his breath trembling. He slammed his foot on the gas, the tires spinning in the mud before catching traction. He drove fast, watching the speedometer climb past 70, then 80. He needed distance. He needed lights. 5 miles down the road, his heart rate finally began to slow. The adrenaline crash left him shaking. He needed to see her face again, to rationalize the fear. Maybe she was just a junkie. Maybe she was a local weirdo. He needed to prove to himself she was just a person.
He pulled into a gravel turnout under a flickering streetlight, the first light he'd seen in an hour. He put the car in park and grabbed his phone, syncing it to the dash cam's Wi-Fi. Crazy world, he muttered, repeating his own words as the app loaded. He scrolled back to the timestamp, 11:42 p.m., the moment he picked her up. On the small screen of his phone, he watched the playback. The video showed the rain-slicked road. The car slowed down. He saw himself in the driver's seat, looking stressed, eyes baggy. He saw his lips move. Idiot, just keep driving. Then he unlocked the doors. On the screen, Elias watched himself wait. He watched himself turn his head slightly to the right, addressing the rear-view mirror. But the back door never opened. Elias felt the blood drain from his face, leaving him dizzy. He watched his on-screen self talking. "Where are you headed?" The video Elias asked the empty air. Silence. No voice answered him on the recording. Nasty night to be out walking. Car trouble? Silence. The back seat was empty. The upholstery was dry. There was no girl in the yellow dress, no matted hair, no dark eyes, just the empty gray fabric of the Honda's interior. Elias watched, horrified, as his on-screen self flinched, as if hearing something terrible. He watched himself reach for the radio, turn it off, and then stare into the rearview mirror with genuine fear, talking to absolutely nothing. "You have a camera," the girl had said. "Cameras see what eyes forget." On the screen, the video Elias nodded at the empty seat. "Yeah, safety first." Elias dropped the phone. It clattered into the cup holder. His breath came in short, jagged gasps. He looked at the rearview mirror. It was just glass and plastic, reflecting his own terrified eyes. He wasn't alone. He couldn't be. He had heard her. He had smelled the ozone and the rot. He reached back to touch the rear seat, needing to feel the dampness, needing physical proof. His hand brushed the fabric, bone dry. But as he pulled his hand back, he froze. Sitting in the middle of the back seat, exactly where she had been sitting, was a small, perfectly dry index card. It hadn't been there before. Elias turned on the dome light, his hand trembling as he reached for it. He flipped it over. Written in jagged charcoal scrawl were 3 words: "Check the trunk."
Chapter 2.
knocking from the trunk. The index card felt heavy in Elias's hand, heavier than paper had any right to be. Check the trunk. The charcoal letters seemed to vibrate against the white background, mocking him. He crumpled the card in his fist and shoved it into the pocket of his hoodie, his breath misting on the windshield. "It's a prank," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Some sick joke. Someone slipped it in while I was getting gas earlier." But he knew that was a lie. He had cleaned the car this morning, vacuumed every inch. The back seat had been empty. He reached for the ignition, desperate to hear the engine roar to life, to drown out the silence of the forest that pressed in around the flickering streetlight. He turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. "Come on," he pleaded, twisting the key again. Click, click, click. The battery was dead, or something was draining it. And then he heard it. Thump. It was dull, muffled, but unmistakable. The car swayed slightly on its suspension, a subtle rocking motion that sent a wave of nausea rolling through Elias's gut. The sound hadn't come from the woods. It hadn't come from the engine block. It had come from behind him. Elias froze, his eyes locked on the rearview mirror. The back seat was still empty, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the streetlight above. Thump, thump. Louder this time, more urgent. It was coming from the trunk. "No," Elias hissed, shaking his head. "There's nothing in there. Just the spare. Just the jumper cables." Thump, thump, thump. The force of the blows shook the chassis. It sounded like someone, or something, was hammering their fists against the metal from the inside, desperate to get out. It wasn't the sound of loose cargo shifting. It was the rhythmic, frantic pounding of a living thing. Elias scrambled for the door handle, tumbling out of the car and onto the wet gravel. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air was freezing, biting through his clothes. He backed away from the vehicle, his chest heaving. The Civic sat there under the cone of light, looking innocuous, just a piece of machinery. Then the car rocked again. Bang. The sound echoed through the trees like a gunshot. "Let me out." The voice was muffled, thick with panic, barely audible through the steel and insulation, but it was there. A man's voice. Elias stared at the trunk, his mind fracturing. He was alone. He was miles from civilization. If someone was trapped in there, how? When? He looked around for a weapon. He grabbed a heavy rock from the side of the road, the jagged stone digging into his palm. He had to open it. If there was someone dying in there, he couldn't just leave them. He approached the trunk slowly, the red glow of the taillights painting his wet jeans in the color of blood. Bang, bang, bang. "I'm coming," Elias shouted, his voice sounding thin and pathetic in the vastness of the woods. "Hold on." He reached for the trunk release lever near the driver's seat, through the open window, pulling it with a trembling finger. Pop. The trunk lid sprang up a few inches, the latch disengaging. Instantly, the pounding stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The wind died down. Even the distant thunder faded. There was only the sound of Elias's own blood rushing in his ears. He walked to the rear of the car. He didn't want to lift the lid. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to run, to leave the car, to disappear into the woods. But the curiosity, the morbid, terrible need to know, tethered him to the spot. He hooked his fingers under the lip of the trunk. "Hello?" he called out softly. No answer. Taking a deep breath, he yanked the trunk lid open. The trunk light flickered on, illuminating the small, carpeted space. It was empty. There was no man, no body, no hidden compartment, just the gray carpet lining, a bottle of antifreeze, and his emergency roadside kit velcroed to the side. Elias let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "Crazy," he muttered, running a hand through his wet hair. "I'm going crazy. Sleep deprivation, auditory hallucinations." He leaned in closer, checking the spare tire well, lifting the floor mat. Nothing. He was about to slam the lid shut when he saw it. On the underside of the trunk lid, the painted metal part that faced the interior when closed, there were scratches, deep, gouged lines in the paint, stripping it down to the bare primer and steel. They were fresh. Little curls of red paint still clung to the edges of the grooves. They were fingernail marks. Elias traced one with a trembling finger. It was wet, not with rain, but with a thick, viscous fluid that smeared under his touch. It looked black in the dim light. He recoiled, wiping his hand on his jeans. The smell hit him then, the same smell from the girl in the back seat. Ozone, damp earth.
"Get in the car," he told himself. "Get in the car and drive until the wheels fall off." He slammed the trunk shut, harder than necessary. He ran back to the driver's side, threw himself into the seat, and locked the doors. He tried the ignition again. Please. The engine roared to life immediately, as if it had never been dead. Elias didn't wait. He threw the car into drive and peeled out of the turnout, gravel spraying behind him. He didn't look in the rearview mirror. He didn't want to see if the trunk lid was rattling. He needed directions. He needed the police. He needed to get off this desolate stretch of highway and find a town with lights and people and noise. He tapped the screen of his phone, mounted on the dashboard. The GPS app was open, the blue arrow hovering in the middle of a gray void. "Navigate to the nearest police station," he commanded, his voice shaking. The app spun, calculating. Recalculating. "Come on," Elias urged, glancing at the fuel gauge. He had a quarter tank. Recalculating. The screen flashed, a route appeared. But it wasn't a blue line leading to a highway. It was a jagged red line that seemed to cut straight through the forest, ignoring the established roads entirely. Destination, 0 miles. "That's not right," Elias muttered. He tried to cancel the route, but the screen was unresponsive. The mechanical voice of the GPS filled the cabin, but it sounded distorted, deeper than usual, as if the speaker had been submerged in water. "In 100 feet, turn left." Elias looked ahead. There was no left turn. There was only a dense wall of fog rolling onto the road, swallowing the asphalt. The fog was thick, unnatural, glowing with a faint, bruised luminescence. "Turn left," the GPS insisted. Elias slowed down. Through the swirling mist, he saw it. A narrow, unpaved track branching off the main highway. It wasn't on any map he knew. It looked ancient, the trees arching over it to form a tunnel of twisted branches. He wanted to speed past it. He wanted to keep going straight. But as he looked through the windshield, the main road ahead simply ended. The asphalt dissolved into a sheer drop-off, a bridge that had collapsed long ago, jagged rebar sticking out like broken ribs. He slammed on the brakes, stopping inches from the edge. "Turn left," the GPS said again, almost mocking him. He had no choice. The highway was dead. The trunk had screamed at him.
The girl was a ghost. With a whimper of defeat, Elias reversed the car and turned the wheel. He steered the Honda into the fog, onto the road that shouldn't exist, as the darkness of the tree tunnel swallowed him whole.
Chapter 3. The Road Not on the Map. The transition was subtle at first,
a gradual bleeding of reality into something gray and undefined. The gravel crunching beneath Elias's tires smoothed out, but not into asphalt. The surface below felt spongy, almost organic, absorbing the sound of the car's movement until the Honda seemed to be gliding through a vacuum. The fog, which had been a nuisance on the highway, was now a living thing. It didn't just obscure the world, it erased it. The headlights cut into the murk, terminating abruptly 5 feet in front of the bumper in a wall of swirling white static. Elias drove at a crawl, his foot hovering over the brake. The speedometer read 10 miles per hour, but he felt like he was hurtling toward a precipice. "Continue straight for 6 miles, the GPS intoned. The voice was clearer now, stripped of the static from before, but it sounded clinically detached, like a surgeon narrating an autopsy. "There is no road," Elias whispered, his hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. "This isn't a road." He glanced at the screen. The map display was a void. No grid lines, no street names, no landmarks. Just the blue arrow of his car floating in an endless expanse of beige pixels. Then a shape emerged from the white wall ahead. Elias slammed on the brakes, the seatbelt locking against his chest. It was a car, a sedan rusted to a husk, sitting dead center in the path. It looked like a 1990s Ford Taurus, its paint peeled away to reveal the scab-like oxidation beneath. The tires were flat, the rubber disintegrated into black puddles on the strange ground. Elias breathed in sharply. He checked his mirrors, nothing but fog behind him. He couldn't reverse. The darkness he had just driven through felt final, like a door that had been welded shut. He nudged the steering wheel to the left, inching the Honda around the derelict vehicle. As his headlights swept over the side of the Taurus, he saw the doors were flung wide open. Not just unlocked, but thrown open with violence, the hinges twisted. Inside, the upholstery was shredded. A child's car seat sat in the back, untouched by the rust but covered in a thick layer of gray dust. "Just a breakdown," Elias muttered, the lie tasting like copper in his mouth. Just junk dumped in the woods. But as he cleared the Taurus, another shape loomed, then another. Elias's breath hitched. He wasn't looking at a single abandoned car. He was driving into a graveyard.
Hundreds of vehicles littered the landscape. They were scattered everywhere, some on the road, others half buried in the ditch. Some crashed nose first into trees that looked like petrified lightning. There were pickup trucks from the 70s, sleek sports cars from the early 2000s, and family vans loaded with luggage racks. It was a timeline of disappearances. Elias navigated the maze, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He had to weave between bumpers and open doors. Every single car was empty. Every single door was open. It was as if 1,000 drivers had simultaneously decided to flee into the fog. "Recalculating," the GPS chirped. "Keep right." Elias swerved to avoid an overturned semi-truck cab. The metal was twisted as if a giant hand had wrung it out like a wet towel. "Where are you taking me?" he screamed at the phone. The screen flickered. For a second, the map inverted colors. Black background, red arrow. Then it returned to normal. "Keep right." He obeyed, guiding the Civic through a narrow gap between a moss-covered station wagon and a modern luxury SUV. The SUV's lights were still on, dim and yellowing, the battery in its final throes of death. That's when he saw them. At first, he thought they were trees, tall, thin pillars of darkness standing amidst the wreckage. But trees didn't sway when there was no wind. Trees didn't turn to watch you pass. They were standing on the periphery of his high beams, shadowy figures, elongated and blurred at the edges, like ink dropped into water. They had no faces, no distinct limbs, just a coalescence of black static in the shape of men. There was one standing by the open door of the SUV. Elias didn't breathe. He didn't blink. He let the car roll forward, terrified that if he accelerated, the engine's roar would provoke them. The figure didn't move.
It simply existed, a void in the fog. But as Elias passed, he felt a pressure in his skull, a high-pitched ringing that drilled into his temples. He felt watched, not by eyes, but by a consciousness that was ancient and hungry. He looked in the rearview mirror. The figure by the SUV was gone. No, not gone. It was behind his car, following, gliding over the ground without moving its legs. "Go, go, go," he hissed. He stomped on the gas. The tires spun on the spongy ground, slipping, then catching. The car lurched forward, fishtailing. He clipped the fender of a rusted Beetle.
The screech of metal on metal tearing through the silence. The fog swirled violently in his wake. More shadows detached themselves from the tree line. They were stepping onto the road, blocking his path behind him, closing the net. He looked forward. A wall of abandoned cars blocked the way completely, a pileup of steel and glass. "No!" Elias shouted, slamming his palms against the wheel. "Don't do this!" "Turn left," the GPS commanded. "There is no left. It's blocked." "Turn left." Elias looked left. There was a gap in the trees, a narrow dirt trail, barely wide enough for the Civic, leading down into a dark hollow where the fog was so thick it looked like milk. It was a trap. He knew it was a trap. The shadows were closing in from behind, their forms elongating, stretching toward his taillights. He could hear them now, a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement, 1,000 whispering voices overlapping into a drone of misery. He cranked the wheel hard to the left. The Honda bounced over a ditch, the undercarriage scraping violently against a hidden rock. He gunned the engine, forcing the car into the tunnel of trees. Branches whipped against the windows, sounding like skeletal fingers trying to claw their way inside. He drove blindly, the headlights illuminating nothing but twisting roots and swirling mist. The feeling of the road changed again. The spongy ground gave way to something slick, like wet clay. The car slid, correcting, sliding again. He was descending, going deeper. Suddenly, the trees broke. The claustrophobia of the forest opened up into a clearing. Elias slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting a solitary signpost sticking out of the mud. He sat there, chest heaving, waiting for the shadows to swarm the car. But the clearing was empty. The whispering had stopped. The only sound was the idle of his engine and the blood rushing in his ears. He looked at the signpost. It was an old, diamond-shaped yellow warning sign, riddled with bullet holes and rust. Dead end. Elias laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound. Of course. He reached for his phone to throw it, to smash the GPS that had led him into this hell. But as his hand touched the screen, the display changed. The map was gone. The navigation was gone. The screen was black, save for the caller ID interface. His phone was ringing. The vibration buzzed against his dashboard mount, a harsh, mechanical insect sound. Elias stared at the screen, his blood turning to ice.
The name on the caller ID wasn't unknown. It wasn't scam likely. It was his own name. Incoming call, Elias. And below it, the number displayed was his own cell phone number. He looked at the phone in his hand. Then he looked at the dashboard mount where the call was coming from. It was impossible. He was calling himself. The ringing continued. Buzz, buzz, buzz. It felt like a countdown. Elias didn't want to answer. He knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his marrow, that whatever voice was on the other end of that line did not belong to a human being. But the silence of the clearing was heavy, pressing in on the windows, threatening to shatter the glass. The ringing was the only tether to reality he had left. With a trembling finger, he slid the icon to the right. "Hello?" he whispered.
Chapter 4: A Call from His Own Number. The silence on the line was thick, textured like heavy velvet. It wasn't the empty void of a disconnected call. It was the silence of a room where someone was holding their breath, waiting. "Hello?" Elias whispered again, his voice trembling so violently it barely registered as sound. Static crackled, wet and rhythmic, like lungs struggling against fluid. Then, a voice spoke. Elias. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And the voice, God, the voice was his own. It wasn't an imitation. It was the exact pitch, the exact timbre of his own throat, but stripped of all warmth. It sounded like Elias, if Elias had been dead for a week. "Who is this?" Elias choked out, gripping the phone so hard the plastic creaked. "How are you doing this?" "Listen to me very carefully," the voice, his voice, said. The tone was flat, devoid of empathy. "Do not turn around." Elias froze. The muscles in his neck locked up instantly. The command bypassed his logic and struck directly at his lizard brain. The urge to look was sudden and overwhelming, a physical itch burning between his shoulder blades. "Don't look in the mirror," the voice continued, anticipating his instinct. "Don't look at the back seat. Keep your eyes forward." "Why?" Elias whimpered. Tears were blurring his vision, hot and stinging. "What's in the back?" "Me," the voice said. A wave of Arctic cold washed over the interior of the Honda. It didn't come from the vents. It radiated from the space directly behind the driver's seat. Elias could feel it against the nape of his nape, a localized drop in temperature that felt like a block of ice had been placed on the headrest. He stared rigidly through the windshield. The fog outside was swirling in lazy, hypnotic patterns illuminated by his idling headlights. The dead end sign stood like a tombstone in the mud. "I don't understand," Elias sobbed. "I want to go home. Please." "You are not on the road home, Elias," the voice on the phone said. "You are on the road of leftovers, and you are very close to becoming one." Thump. A soft sound from the back seat. The depression of a cushion being weighted down. The squeak of springs. Someone, something, had just shifted its weight directly behind him. Elias squeezed his eyes shut for a second, fighting the urge to scream. If he screamed, he felt the thing behind him would react. "Eyes open," the voice commanded sharply. "Drive." "I can't," Elias whispered.
It's a dead end. Reverse. Slowly. Do not use your rear view mirror. Use your side mirrors only. If you look at the rear view mirror, you will see me. And if you see me, I will have to show you what I look like now. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Elias didn't want to know what that meant. He remembered the girl in the rain. He remembered the scratching in the trunk. He shifted the car into reverse. The gear stick felt miles away. He kept his head rigidly forward, his eyes darting only to the side mirrors. The side mirrors showed nothing but swirling gray mist and the vague looming shapes of the trees. He eased his foot off the brake. The car rolled backward. Crunch. Squelch. The tires moved over the wet, unidentified matter on the ground. "Left," the voice instructed. "Turn the wheel left." Elias obeyed, his hands shaking so bad he could barely grip the leather. The car swung around, the headlights sweeping across the tree line. For a split second, the beams illuminated something in the woods.
pale, long-limbed shapes, standing perfectly still among the trunks. "Don't look at them," the voice snapped. "Focus." "They're watching me," Elias gasped. "They are waiting for you to make a mistake. Don't give it to them." He continued to reverse, the car groaning as it climbed back up the muddy incline toward the road of abandoned cars. The presence in the back seat was palpable now. He could hear breathing, ragged, wet breaths that didn't match his own rhythm. It sounded like someone trying to inhale through a crushed windpipe. The smell of ozone and rot intensified, filling the small cabin, choking him. You're smelling up my car," Elias said, a hysterical giggle bubbling up in his throat. "Shut up," the voice said. "Stop here." Elias slammed the brakes. He was back on the spongy road, surrounded by the hulks of the rusted vehicles. "Put it in drive. Go forward. Do not speed. They react to sudden movement." Elias shifted gears. He began to creep forward through the graveyard of cars. The fog seemed to be thinning slightly, or perhaps his eyes were just adjusting to the gloom. "Where are we going?" Elias asked. He felt like a hostage in his own vehicle. "There is a seam," the voice said. "A weak point in the fog. You missed it 4 miles back. You were too busy looking at the GPS. The GPS brought me here. The GPS lies. It wants company."
Elias navigated around a jackknifed semi-truck. The breathing behind him got louder. He could feel the fine hairs on his neck standing up, reacting to the static electricity radiating from the passenger. He could almost feel the heat of a face inches from his ear. "Turn right, now." "There's no road there," Elias argued. To his right was a dense thicket of brambles and a rusted chain-link fence. "Drive through it." "I'll crash." "Drive through it, Elias, or look in the mirror and end this now." The scream from the phone was deafening, distorting into a digital screech. At the same moment, the thing in the back seat let out a hiss, a sound like high-pressure steam escaping a valve. Elias screamed. He stomped on the gas and jerked the wheel to the right. The Honda plowed into the chain-link fence. Metal shrieked, sparks flew, and the brambles whipped against the windshield. The car bucked and shuddered, tearing through the undergrowth. Elias squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the impact of a tree, for the crunch of metal that would kill him. But the impact never came. The violent shaking stopped abruptly. The roaring of the engine smoothed out. The sound of tearing metal ceased. Elias opened his eyes. He was on asphalt. Smooth, wet, black asphalt. The fog was gone, replaced by the heavy, rhythmic downpour of a standard thunderstorm. He looked at the speedometer. He was doing 50. He looked at the phone. The screen was dark. The call had ended. Slowly, terrifyingly, he let his eyes drift to the rearview mirror. Empty. The back seat was just gray fabric and shadows. No girl, no monster, no version of himself with a crushed windpipe. Elias let out a long, shuddering breath, his body sagging with relief. He was out. He was back on a real road. He could see road markings, yellow lines, white reflectors. He fumbled for the phone to check the map, but his hands were shaking too hard. He just needed to drive. He needed to put miles between him and that dirt track. Then, up ahead, he saw it. A beacon in the night, a towering sign glowing with neon reds and blues, cutting through the rain like a lighthouse. Gas and Go. It was a massive station, the kind with 20 pumps and a brightly lit convenience store. There were other cars there, parked, silent. It looked like civilization. It looked like safety. "Thank God," Elias whispered. "Thank God." He didn't care that he had half a tank. He needed coffee. He needed to see a human face.
He needed to stand under bright fluorescent lights and wash the smell of rot out of his nose. He signaled right,
pulling off the main road and onto the concrete apron of the gas station. The lights were blindingly bright after the darkness of the forest, hurting his eyes. He pulled up to pump 4 and put the car in park. He unlocked the door and stepped out. The rain felt good, clean, cold, real. He looked around. The station was quiet, too quiet for a place with this many lights. He saw a semi-truck parked off to the side, its engine idling, but the cab was dark. He saw a family sedan at pump 2, the nozzle inserted, but no one was standing by it. "Hello?" Elias called out. The wind grabbed his voice and tore it away. He walked toward the convenience store. The automatic doors slid open with a cheerful ding-dong. Inside, the aisles were fully stocked, candy bars in neat rows, soda coolers humming, a pot of coffee on the burner, the liquid dark and fresh. But there was no one behind the counter. "Hello?" Elias walked further in. "Is anyone working?" He reached the counter. On the linoleum floor behind the register, a cigarette was burning in an ashtray, a long column of ash defying gravity. A mop bucket sat nearby, the water still swirling as if someone had just plunged the mop into it seconds ago. Elias spun around, scanning the store. Empty. He looked out the window at the pumps. The sedan at pump 2, the nozzle was in the tank, but the display on the pump was dark. And now that he looked closer, the car had a layer of dust on it, thick, gray dust. He looked at the semi-truck. The tires were flat. He looked at his own car at pump 4. And then he looked at the sign above the door he had just walked through. Open 24 hours. But the O in open flickered and died. Then the P, then the E, until only N remained. And then the lights in the store began to hum, a rising pitch that vibrated in his teeth. Elias backed away, reaching for the door. But the automatic sensors didn't trigger. The glass doors remained shut. Outside, the floodlights over the pumps blinked once, twice, and then they went out.
Chapter 5: The Vanishing Gas Station. The darkness inside the convenience store was absolute. It fell like a guillotine blade, severing Elias from the visual world instantly. The hum of the refrigerators died with a wet gurgle, and the cheerful ding-dong of the door sensor was replaced by the oppressive drumming of rain on the metal roof. Elias stood frozen near the entrance, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The air in the store, which had smelled of brewing coffee and lemon cleaner just seconds ago, shifted. The scent curdled, turning into the musk of damp rot and stagnating water. "Hello?" he whispered, fumbling for his phone. He activated the flashlight app. The beam cut a jagged cone through the gloom, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Thick, heavy dust that hadn't been there a moment before. He swept the light toward the counter. The burning cigarette was gone. The ashtray was there, that it was rusted through, fused to the countertop by years of oxidation. The mop bucket he had seen swirling with soapy water was now dry, cracked, and filled with dead moths. "No," Elias breathed, backing away until his spine hit the glass of the automatic doors. "No, no, no." He turned and shoved his hands into the gap between the sliding doors, grunting as he forced them apart. The mechanism ground against decades of grit, screaming in protest before giving him just enough space to squeeze through. He tumbled out onto the concrete apron. The floodlights were still dead. The only illumination came from the faint, sickly glow of the moon trying to punch through the storm clouds. He sprinted for his car. The rain slicked his hair to his skull, cold and biting. He reached the Honda, ripped the door open, and threw himself inside, locking it instantly. "Start. Please start." He twisted the key. The engine turned over, caught, and purred to life. The dashboard lights flickered on, casting a reassuring green glow over his trembling hands. He threw the gearshift into drive, ready to peel out of there, to leave this haunted place behind. But his headlights swept across the forecourt. The exit was gone.
Where the driveway should have been, the paved entrance he had used just minutes ago, there was now a dense, impenetrable wall of tall grass and garnered scrub brush. It looked like the vegetation had been growing there for 20 years. Elias spun the wheel, aiming for the other exit. Blocked. A rusted chain-link fence.
"I just drove in here," he screamed, slamming his palms against the steering wheel. "I just drove in." He was trapped. The gas station wasn't a sanctuary. It was a cage. Panic, hot and blinding, threatened to make him pass out. He couldn't drive through the fence. The ground beyond looked uneven, possibly a ditch. If he wrecked the car here, he was dead. He checked the fuel gauge. It hadn't moved. He still had half a tank. The car was idling fine. The heater was working. "Okay," he told himself, his voice shaking. "Okay, wait it out. Just wait for the sun. Things look different in the light." He reclined the seat, keeping the engine running. He needed the noise. He needed the vibration. He cracked the window a fraction of an inch to let in fresh air, but the smell of the swamp outside made him gag, so he rolled it back up. He stared at the darkened storefront of the Gas and Go. In the flashes of lightning, the building looked different. The sign above the door was hanging by a single wire. The windows were boarded up. "It's a trick," he muttered, squeezing his eyes shut. "Just a trick. Like the trunk. Like the phone call." He didn't mean to sleep. He wanted to keep watch, to stare down the darkness until it blinked. But the adrenaline crash was a physical blow. His body, pushed beyond its limits by hours of terror, simply shut down. His head lolled against the headrest, and the rhythmic drumming of the rain dragged him into a black, dreamless void. Dap, dap, dap. Elias jerked awake with a gasp, flailing his arms. Sunlight, blinding, glorious sunlight flooded the cabin. He blinked, shielding his eyes. The rain had stopped. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. Birds were singing a cheerful, mocking melody. "Morning," he croaked, his throat dry as sandpaper. He sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He looked out the windshield, expecting to see the gas pumps, the convenience store, the rusted fence. He saw nothing. Elias unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door. He stepped out, his boots sinking in soft, dry earth. He was parked in the middle of a field. The grass was waist-high, golden and swaying in a gentle breeze. It stretched for miles in every direction, an ocean of wheat and weeds. There was no concrete, no asphalt, no pumps. He walked around the car, his hands trembling. There were no tire tracks leading to where he was parked. The grass around the Honda was undisturbed. Where is it? Elias spun around. Where is the station? He looked at the ground. He found a slab of concrete, barely visible beneath the soil and roots. It was cracked and broken, no bigger than a coffee table. Protruding from the earth near it was a rusted metal pipe, the remains of a pump island, perhaps, from 50 years ago. He walked over to where the store had been. There was a depression in the ground, a cellar hole filled with rubble and old timber. A charred beam stuck out of the mess, black against the green grass. Elias fell to his knees. He dug his fingers into the dirt, needing to feel the reality of it. "I was inside," he whispered. "I bought. I didn't buy anything." "Wait." He patted his pockets. When he had been in the store, right before the lights went out, he had grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler. He remembered the condensation on the plastic, the cold slickness of it. He ran back to the car. Lying on the passenger seat, where he had tossed it in his panic, was a bottle. Elias picked it up. It was an old glass soda bottle, the kind they stopped making in the 60s. The label had rotted away entirely. Inside, there was no clear water. There was only a thick black sludge. It sloshed heavily against the glass. He dropped the bottle. It didn't shatter. It just thudded onto the floor mat. He looked out at the horizon. Far off in the distance, shimmering in the heat haze, he saw a line of black asphalt. The highway.
He was miles away from it. He got back into the driver's seat. He didn't look at the black sludge in the bottle. He turned the key. The engine hesitated. It coughed, whined, and then caught. As he put the car in gear to tear through the field toward the distant road, he glanced at the dashboard clock. It was blinking 12 o'clock, but the date on the display had changed. October 14th. Elias stared. It had been October 12th when he started this drive. He had lost 2 days. "Just get to the road," he sobbed, slamming his foot on the gas. "Just get to the road." The Honda plowed through the tall grass, the stalks whipping against the bumper. He drove like a madman, bouncing over hidden ruts, his eyes locked on the strip of blacktop in the distance. He reached the shoulder of the highway 10 minutes later, the car skidding onto the gravel. He merged onto the asphalt, the tires humming a song of civilization. He was safe. He was back on the map.
But as he accelerated, checking his rearview mirror to ensure the field was behind him, he saw something on the side of the road ahead. A small figure, a child, standing by the white line, waiting to cross. Elias's foot hovered over the brake. "Don't stop," he whispered. "Don't you dare stop." But the child stepped out.
Chapter 6. The Child Crossing the Road. The asphalt hummed beneath the tires, a monotonous, reassuring drone that Elias clung to like a lifeline. The sun was high and cruel, bleaching the color out of the world. It was a stark, blinding white light that offered no warmth, only exposure. Elias kept glancing at the dashboard. OCT 14. 2 days. He had lost 2 days in that gas station, in that field. His stomach was a hollowed-out pit, gnawing at his ribs, but he didn't dare stop. Not again. The memory of the black sludge in the soda bottle was still vivid enough to make his throat constrict. "Just drive," he rasped, his voice sounding foreign in the quiet cabin. "Find a town, find people, find a cop." The road, Route 9 according to a rusted sign he'd passed miles back, stretched out in a straight, unwavering line through a tunnel of dense, encroaching woodland. These were pines, tall and imposing, creating a canyon of shadows that the noon sun couldn't penetrate. He was doing 60. The car felt sluggish, heavy, as if the gravity on this road was stronger than it should be. Then, the road shimmered. Heat haze danced off the blacktop ahead, distorting the air into liquid mirrors. Through the wavering distortion, a shape materialized on the right shoulder. Small. Stillness. Elias's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles popped. Don't look. Don't stop. It was a mantra now, a prayer to a god that had abandoned him somewhere back at mile marker 0. But as the car ate up the distance, the shape resolved. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 6 years old. He wore flannel pajamas, blue with little rocket ships on them, and he was barefoot. He stood perfectly still on the gravel shoulder, facing the road, his head down. Elias's foot hovered over the brake, warring with the leaden weight on the accelerator. It's a trap, his mind screamed. It's the girl in the rain. It's the thing in the trunk. He's not real, Elias whispered, squeezing his eyes shut for a microsecond. He's not real. He opened his eyes. The boy looked up. His face was pale, almost translucent in the harsh sunlight, but his eyes were dark, cavernous pits of despair. He didn't look evil. He looked lost. He looked terrified. And then, with the sudden, jerky movement of a marionette,
The boy stepped onto the asphalt. No.
The scream tore out of Elias's throat before he could stop it. Instinct, primordial and undeniable, overrode his fear. You don't run over a child. You just don't. He slammed the brake pedal to the floor. The Honda shrieked, the tires locked, rubber burning against the pavement, creating a cloud of acrid white smoke. The seatbelt seized, slamming into Elias's chest like a sledgehammer, knocking the wind out of him. The car skidded, fishtailing violently to the left, then the right. The world became a blur of spinning trees and sky. Thump. He felt it. A dull, sickening impact through the chassis. Not a heavy collision, but a soft, yielding resistance. The car shuddered to a halt, resting diagonally across both lanes. The engine stalled. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the cooling metal and Elias's own ragged, gasping breath. "Oh God," he sobbed, unbuckling the belt with trembling fingers. "Oh God, no." He threw the door open and stumbled out. The heat of the asphalt radiated through the soles of his boots. The smell of burnt rubber was choking. He ran to the front of the car. "Hey," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Kid, are you okay?" He reached the bumper. He looked down, bracing himself for the sight of blood, of twisted limbs, of blue flannel torn against the road. There was nothing. The asphalt was empty. No body, no blood, no boy. Elias spun around, scanning the ditch, the tree line. "Where are you? I didn't mean to. I tried to stop." Silence answered him. The trees stood mute, watching. He looked back at the road, confusion crowding his panic. He had felt the impact. He was sure of it. Then he saw them. Starting from the right shoulder, leading directly into the path of his car, were footprints. They were small, bare footprints. But they weren't made of dirt or mud. They were wet, dark, glistening water on the scorching hot asphalt. Elias took a step closer, mesmerized. The prints walked out to the middle of the lane. They stopped exactly where the bumper of his car would have been. And there, right in the center of the lane, the footprints changed. Elias crouched down, the heat from the road baking his face. The water in the prints was sizzling. Tiny wisps of steam rose from the toes, curling into the air. As he watched, the footprints began to fade, not drying up, but dissolving. The darkness of the wet print turned gray, then translucent, then vanished entirely,
leaving the asphalt pristine. It was as if the world was deleting the evidence. "He was here," Elias whispered, touching the spot where the last print had been. The road was dry and hot. He was right here. He looked further down the road, past where the car had stopped. There were no footprints leading away. The trail simply ended at the point of impact. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather snaked Elias's spine. He stood up, backing away toward the driver's side door. The feeling of being watched returned, stronger than ever. It wasn't just the trees anymore. It felt like the road itself was aware of him. He grabbed the door handle, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror mounted on the door. Movement. Far back, maybe half a mile down the straight stretch of road he had just traveled, something glinted in the sun. A car. It was black, matte black, swallowing the light rather than reflecting it. It was sitting stationary in the middle of the road, facing him. Elias squinted. The heat haze made it wobble, but the shape was distinct.
It looked like an old sedan, heavy and muscular. An interceptor. "Who are you?" Elias breathed. The black car didn't move. It just sat there, a predator waiting for the prey to stop struggling. Elias scrambled into the driver's seat. He turned the key, praying to the dashboard. The engine roared to life, sounding rougher than before, a mechanical growl of protest. He didn't look for the boy again. The boy was gone. The boy was part of the road now. Elias slammed the car into gear and floored it. The tires chirped as he sped away from the fading steam, away from the memory of the thud. He checked the rearview mirror. The black car was moving. It wasn't speeding up gradually. It had simply appeared closer. 1 second it was a speck. The next, it was filling the horizon, maintaining a perfect, predatory distance. Elias pushed the speedometer to 80. The black car matched him effortlessly. "Okay," Elias said, his voice tight with a new kind of fear. "You want to play tag? Let's play." He gripped the wheel, his eyes flicking between the road ahead and the mirror behind. The dread of the supernatural, the ghosts, the time loops, was momentarily replaced by the primal fear of being hunted by something metal and real. But as he stared at the pursuing vehicle, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The black car had no license plate, and the windshield.
The windshield was tinted so dark it looked like a slab of obsidian. There was no driver visible.
Chapter 7: The Car That Followed. The rear-view mirror had become a window into hell. For the last 3 hours, Elias had been driving with his eyes glued to that rectangle of glass, watching the black car. It was a matte, light-swallowing void on wheels, an old muscle car model that looked like it had been carved out of obsidian. It had no chrome, no license plate, and windows tinted so dark they looked like oil slicks. It didn't just follow him, it mimicked him. When Elias swerved to avoid a pothole, the black car swerved in perfect unison, like a shadow tethered to his bumper. When he accelerated to 90, the black car surged forward without the front end lifting, defying the physics of torque. When he slowed to a crawl, hoping to force it to pass, it slowed too, maintaining a precise predatory distance of 10 feet. "What do you want?" Elias screamed, his voice raw. He slammed his hand against the steering wheel. "Pass me, just pass me." The black car didn't answer. It just sat there in the mirror, a silent shark in the gray ocean of the highway. The sun had begun to dip below the tree line, casting long skeletal shadows across the road. The interior of the Honda was dimming, and with the fading light, the menace of the pursuer grew. Elias noticed something that made his stomach turn over. The black car didn't have headlights, or if it did, the driver refused to turn them on. It was just a rushing darkness, visible only by its silhouette against the twilight. Elias was exhausted. The adrenaline that had spiked after the incident with the child was curdling into a toxic sludge of paranoia and fatigue. His eyes burned, his hands were cramping. He tried to rationalize it. Road rage, just some psycho messing with me. But deep down, he knew this wasn't a psycho. A psycho would have rammed him by now. A psycho would be flashing high beams and honking. This was something else. This was hurting. The road began to wind, climbing up a steep incline into a dense mountain pass. The trees here were ancient, their branches interlocking above the asphalt to form a tunnel. As the incline steepened, the Honda's engine whined in protest. The temperature gauge crept up. "Don't die on me," Elias pleaded, patting the dashboard. "Please, not now." He glanced in the mirror. The black car was closer, 5 feet. He could see the grille now,
a jagged metal maw that looked like clenched teeth. There was no radiator behind it, just blackness. Pump.
A gentle nudge, metal kissing plastic. Elias gasped, gripping the wheel as the Honda shuddered. Bump. Harder this time. The impact sent a jolt through his spine. The black car was testing him, tasting him. "Stop it!" Elias shrieked. He floored the gas pedal. The Honda downshifted with a lurch, screaming as it crested the hill. He flew down the other side, gravity aiding his escape. The speedometer needle buried itself past the 100 mark. The car shook violently, the steering wheel vibrating in his hands. The black car stayed right there. It didn't look like it was speeding. It looked like it was gliding, effortless and silent. Elias took a sharp curve, the tires squealing, threatening to lose traction and sent him tumbling into the ravine below. He corrected, fishtailing, and shot out onto a straightaway. And then he saw it. Lights. Beautiful, flashing, authoritative lights. Blue and red strobes cutting through the dusk, bouncing off the trees. A checkpoint. 2 police cruisers were parked across the road, blocking both lanes. Flares were burning on the asphalt, sputtering red smoke. Uniformed figures stood by the cars, holding flashlights. Relief crashed over Elias like a physical wave. He started laughing, a hysterical, bubbling sound. "Police! Oh, thank God, police!" He began to brake, pumping the pedal to signal his intent. He checked the mirror one last time, ready to point, ready to scream, that guy right there is trying to kill me." The mirror showed the black car right on his bumper, looming huge and terrifying. Elias looked forward, navigating the stopping distance. He was 50 yards from the checkpoint. He looked back at the mirror. The road behind him was empty. Elias blinked. He checked the side mirrors. Empty. He turned his head, risking a look through the rear window. There was nothing but the long, gray stretch of asphalt and the encroaching night. No black car. No taillights turning off into the woods. There were no turnoffs. No dust settling. It was just gone, as if the photons that comprised it had simply decided to stop existing. Elias slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt 10 feet from the nearest police cruiser. He threw the door open and scrambled out, his legs jelly. "Officer," he yelled, pointing frantically back the way he came. "Did you see it? Did you see the car?" A state trooper, a tall man with a flat-brimmed hat and sunglasses that reflected the dying light, walked slowly toward him.
"Step away from the vehicle, sir," the trooper said. His voice was deep, devoid of urgency. "There was a black car," Elias babbled, his chest heaving. "It was chasing me for hours. It was right on my bumper. It tried to run me off the road." The trooper stopped in front of him. He didn't look down the road. He just stared at Elias. "License and registration." "Did you hear me?" Elias grabbed the trooper's arm. The uniform felt stiff, cold. The trooper looked at Elias's hand, then back at his face. Elias let go, recoiling. "Sorry, it vanished. It was right there." "We get a lot of tired drivers on this stretch," the trooper said. He tipped his head back slightly, sniffing the air. "Long road, plays tricks on the eyes. The mind wants company." Elias stared at him. The comment felt wrong. Too poetic for a cop. "Is the road closed?" Elias asked, looking past the cruisers. "Why the checkpoint?" "Safety check," the trooper said vaguely. "Looking for irregularities." Another figure emerged from behind the second cruiser. It was another officer, holding a clipboard. But unlike the first trooper, this one moved with a strange, fluid grace. "He's clear,"
the second officer said. The voice was genderless, smooth. You're free to go, the tall trooper said. He stepped aside. Elias hesitated. He didn't want to go. He wanted to stay here, under the blue and red lights. Can I wait here a minute, just to catch my breath? No loitering, the trooper said. The tone was final. Keep moving. Don't stop until you reach the next town. It's not safe to stop. Elias looked at the dark road ahead. It plunged back into the forest, a mouth waiting to swallow him. Is there a town soon? Eventually, the trooper said. Elias got back into the Honda. The safety of the checkpoint felt cold now, sterile and unwelcoming. As he buckled his seatbelt, he noticed a figure sitting on the guardrail just past the police cruisers. It was a person in a gray hoodie, huddled against the cold, a duffel bag at their feet. They looked miserable. The tall trooper tapped on Elias's window. Elias rolled it down. One more thing, the trooper said, leaning in. His sunglasses slid down his nose slightly. Elias saw his eyes. They were gray. Not just the irises, the whites, the pupils. Everything was a flat, matte gray. That traveler, their car broke down 3 miles back. Give them a lift.
I don't pick up hitchhikers, Elias stammered. Not since the girl. You do tonight, the trooper said. He smiled. It was a tight, skin-stretching expression that showed too many teeth. It's the law of the road. You help the stranded. The trooper straightened up and waved his hand. The figure on the guardrail stood up and walked toward Elias's car. Elias wanted to lock the doors. He wanted to scream. But the gray-eyed trooper was watching him, hand resting on his heavy utility belt. The passenger door opened. A young man slid into the seat. He looked normal enough. Jeans, hoodie, tired face. He smelled of rain and old coins. Thanks for the ride, the passenger said. His voice was pleasant, innocuous. Cops said you were heading my way. Yeah, Elias whispered, gripping the wheel. Sure. He eased the car past the cruisers. As he drove away, he looked in the rearview mirror to see the checkpoint one last time. The road behind him was empty. No cruisers, no flares, no troopers. Just darkness. Elias squeezed his eyes shut and opened them again. Still empty. You okay, man? The passenger asked, buckling his seatbelt. You look like you've seen a ghost. Elias didn't answer. He stared at the rearview mirror again. He could see the road behind them. He could see the headrest of the passenger seat. But he couldn't see the passenger. He turned his head to the right. The young man was sitting right there, looking at him, solid and real. He looked back at the mirror. The passenger seat in the reflection was empty.
Chapter 8. The Passenger Without Reflection. The interior of the Honda Civic felt smaller than it ever had before. It was a pressurized capsule of stale air, fear, and the rhythmic thrum-thrum of tires on asphalt. Elias kept his hands at 10 and 2, his knuckles white ridges against the steering wheel. He didn't dare turn his head to the right. He didn't have to. He could hear the shallow intake of breath. He could smell the scent of damp wool and metallic copper, like a handful of pennies clenched in a sweaty fist. He could feel the body heat radiating from the passenger seat, a warmth that felt feverish and wrong against the chill of the cabin. "Nice car," the passenger said. His voice was smooth, devoid of the gravelly menace of the voice on the phone earlier. It sounded like a college kid making conversation. "Runs quiet." Elias swallowed hard, his throat clicking. "It gets me from A to B." "Does it?" the passenger asked. The tone was light, teasing. "Seems like you've been having trouble with B tonight." Elias's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The road behind them was a ribbon of darkness swallowed by the night. The back seat was empty, and the passenger seat. In the reflection of the glass, the passenger seat was vacant. The gray upholstery was uncompressed. The seatbelt hung flush against the B-pillar, unbuckled. Elias squeezed his eyes shut for a heartbeat, then snapped them open and looked to his right. The young man was sitting there. He was solid. He was wearing a gray hoodie with the strings frayed at the ends. He had the seatbelt pulled across his chest. The buckle clicked securely into the receiver. He was picking at a loose thread on his jeans. "You okay, man?" the passenger asked, looking up. His eyes were dark, capturing the dashboard lights. "No," Elias rasped. "Nothing." "Good. I hate tailgaters." The passenger leaned back, resting his head against the headrest. "The cops back there said you were heading north. Funny direction to go." "Why is that funny?" "Because north implies up, out, away." The passenger turned his head, staring at Elias's profile. "Nobody gets away from here, Elias. Not really." Elias slammed on the brakes, not to a stop, but enough to jerk the car. "How do you know my name?" The passenger smiled. It was a slow, lazy expression that didn't reach his eyes. "It's on your registration, in the glove box. Plus, you look like an Elias."
A sufferer.
"Who are you?" Elias whispered. "Why don't you have a reflection?" The air in the car went still. The humming of the tires seemed to drop an octave. The passenger didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. "You notice that? Most people don't look close enough. They see what they expect to see. They see a hitchhiker. They see a kid in a hoodie. They don't look at the glass." He reached out and tapped the dashboard with a fingernail. Click, click, click. "Mirrors are honest," the passenger said softly. "Eyes lie, brains lie. They fill in the gaps. But glass just shows you the photons. And right now, the photons say I'm not here." Are you dead?" Elias asked, the question sounding absurd even as he voiced it. The passenger laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Dead? No. Dead implies I was alive once, like you, like the girl in the yellow dress you left in the rain, like the kid you thought you hit." Elias flinched. "I didn't hit him. There was no body." "There never is," the passenger agreed. "Just footprints, fading memories. That's what this road is, Elias. It's a digestive tract. It breaks you down mile by mile, takes your hope, then your sanity, then your time." "I want you out," Elias said, his voice trembling. "Get out of my car." "Can't do that. Not yet. The ride isn't over. We haven't reached the drop-off." "Where is the drop-off?" "Mile marker 66. It's coming up." Elias looked at the odometer. He didn't know where he was. The road signs had become gibberish miles ago, symbols that looked like Cyrillic or hieroglyphs mixed with standard highway Gothic. "Why are you doing this?" Elias asked, tears pricking his eyes. "I just want to go home." "Home?" the passenger mused, testing the word like it was a foreign coin. "Do you remember where home is, Elias? Do you remember the color of your front door? Do you remember the last thing you said to your wife before you got in this car?" Elias opened his mouth to answer. Blue. The door was blue. No, it was red. Wait, did he have a wife? Yes, Sarah. No, Sarah was his sister. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. The memories were slippery, dissolving like cotton candy in water. He couldn't picture his driveway. He couldn't remember why he was driving in the first place. Was it a business trip? A funeral? A vacation? "Stop it," Elias whispered. "Stop messing with my head." "I'm not doing anything," the passenger said gently.
The road is doing it. I'm just keeping you company while you forget. The passenger reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. He tapped one out. "Do you mind?" "Yes," Elias said. "I mind." The passenger lit it anyway. The flame of the lighter flared bright orange, illuminating the hollows of his face.
He took a long drag. Elias smelled nothing. No smoke, no tobacco, just the same damp, coppery scent. He looked in the mirror. No flame, no cigarette, just the empty seat. "You're not real," Elias chanted under his breath. "You're a hallucination, sleep deprivation." "If I'm not real," the passenger said, exhaling a cloud of invisible smoke, "then who is steering the car?" Elias looked down at his hands. They were gripping the wheel. But then he felt a pressure on his right arm. A hand, cold as liquid nitrogen, clamped around his wrist. Elias screamed and tried to yank his arm away, but the grip was iron. "Eyes on the road, Elias," the passenger barked, his voice suddenly deepening into a demonic roar. Elias snapped his head forward. He had drifted into the oncoming lane. A massive shape, a logging truck with no lights, roared past him, missing his bumper by inches. The wind buffeted the little Honda, shaking it violently. Elias swerved back into his lane, hyperventilating. He looked at his wrist. There were bruises forming, finger-shaped bruises. He looked at the passenger. The young man was sitting calmly, hands in his lap, smoking his invisible cigarette. "Careful," the passenger said. "You almost became part of the scenery." "You grabbed me," Elias whispered, rubbing his wrist. The cold lingered, burning his skin. "I saved you. You're not ready to stop yet. You haven't seen the faceless man." "The who?" "The next one. He's waiting. He hates the rain, but he stands in it anyway." The passenger pointed a finger at the windshield. "Look." Ahead, a green mile marker sign emerged from the darkness. MM66. "This is me," the passenger said cheerfully. "Stop the car." Elias didn't argue. He slammed the brakes, pulling onto the gravel shoulder. The car skidded to a halt. "Thanks for the lift," the passenger said. He unbuckled his seatbelt. The sound was loud. Click. He opened the door. The interior light flickered on. "Hey, Elias?" Elias didn't look at him. He stared straight ahead. "Just go." "Check your mirror one last time." Elias couldn't help it. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror. For the first time,
The seat wasn't empty. Reflected in the glass, sitting in the back seat, was a corpse. It was bloated, waterlogged, skin slipping off the bone. It was wearing a yellow sundress. Elias screamed and whipped his head around. The back seat was empty. He looked to the passenger seat. Empty. The door was standing open, the night wind blowing in. "You're welcome," a voice whispered from the empty air. Elias reached across and slammed the passenger door shut. He locked it. He locked all of them. And then, as if on cue, the first heavy drop of rain hit the windshield. Splat. Then another. Splat. Within seconds, the sky opened up. It wasn't just rain. It was a deluge, a vertical river drowning the world. The wipers shrieked as they dragged across the glass. Elias put the car in drive, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold the wheel. He peeled out onto the road, leaving mile marker 66 behind. But the dread didn't leave. It settled in the back of his throat, tasting of bile. The passenger's words echoed in the small cabin. He's waiting. He hates the rain, but he stands in it anyway. Elias drove into the storm, and the headlights cut a weak path through the falling water, searching for the next nightmare.
Chapter 9. The Faceless Man. The rain was no longer just weather. It was a verdict. It hammered the roof of the Honda Civic with the force of 1,000 ball-peen hammers, a deafening industrial roar that drowned out Elias's own thoughts. The windshield wipers were useless, thrashing back and forth on high speed like a drowning swimmer, smearing the water rather than clearing it. Elias hunched over the steering wheel, his nose inches from the glass, squinting into the gray liquid chaos. The headlights were swallowed by the deluge,
projecting only a few feet of murky yellow light before dissolving into the storm. "Keep moving," he muttered, though he couldn't hear his own voice over the drumming on the roof. "Just keep moving." The passenger from the last mile, the boy without a reflection, had left a lingering chill in the cabin that the heater couldn't touch. His words rattled around in Elias's skull like loose change. He hates the rain, but he stands in it anyway. Elias checked the speedometer. He was doing 20. Anything faster was suicide on this slick, blacktop river. The road felt narrow, claustrophobic, the trees on either side bending inward under the weight of the water, forming a tunnel of dripping vegetation. He tried to remember where he was going. Home. But the concept was slippery. When he tried to picture his house, he saw only a gray blur. When he tried to picture his wife's face, he saw static. The panic of forgetting was a cold knot in his stomach, tighter than the fear of the ghosts. Then the darkness ahead shifted. It wasn't a car. It wasn't a deer. It was a vertical line of stillness in a world of chaotic motion. Elias slammed on the brakes. The tires locked, skimming over the layer of water on the road. The car hydroplaned, drifting sideways in a sickening, weightless glide before the tires caught traction again. The Civic shuddered to a halt, the engine stalling out. Elias sat there, gripping the wheel, his heart hammering against his ribs. 30 feet in front of the bumper, standing dead center in the high beams, was a man. He wore a dark suit that was soaked through, clinging to his frame like a second skin. His arms hung limp at his sides. He wasn't hitchhiking. He wasn't waving for help. He was just standing there, letting the torrential rain batter him. "Move!" Elias shouted, pounding the horn. The horn blared, a pathetic, singular note that was instantly swallowed by the storm. The figure didn't flinch.
"Get out of the road!" Elias screamed, rolling down the window an inch. Freezing water sprayed into his face, stinging his eyes. The man took a step forward, then another. He moved with a terrible, jerky gait, like a stop-motion animation with missing frames. He walked toward the car, straight down the yellow line. Elias fumbled for the ignition. "Turn over, turn over." The engine cranked, whined, but didn't catch. "Come on," Elias pleaded, slamming his hand against the dashboard. The man was 10 feet away now. Elias locked the doors. He checked the windows. He pressed himself back into the seat, trying to put as much distance between himself and the windshield as possible. The man stepped into the full intensity of the headlights. Elias stopped breathing. The man had a head. He had hair, dark, matted, plastered to his skull by the rain. He had a neck. He had ears. But where his face should have been, there was nothing. It wasn't a wound. It wasn't a mask. It was a smooth, uninterrupted sheet of pale, wet skin. There were no eyes to weep, no nose to breathe, no mouth to scream. It was a thumb of flesh, an erasure of identity. The horror of it was absolute. It was worse than a skull, worse than a monster. It was a void. The faceless man stopped inches from the front bumper. The rain streamed down the smooth surface of his head, pooling where the collarbones met the neck. Elias couldn't look away. He was paralyzed by the sheer wrongness of it. How did he breathe? How did he see? The faceless man raised a hand. His fingers were long, pale, and wrinkled from the water. He reached out and touched the hood of the car. Thump. Elias felt the vibration through the chassis. The man began to walk around the side of the car, his hand trailing along the fender, scratching against the metal. He moved toward the driver's side door. "No," Elias whimpered. "No, please." He turned the key again. The starter motor screamed in protest. The faceless man reached the window. He leaned down.
Elias stared into the blank surface of flesh just inches from the glass. He expected to see nothing, but as he stared, he saw something terrifying. He saw himself. The wet, smooth skin acted like a mirror. Elias saw his own terrified face reflected in the creature's non-face, but his reflection looked older, grayer, and there was a deep, dark gash across his forehead in the reflection that Elias didn't have. The faceless man raised a hand and tapped on the glass.
Tap, tap, tap. It was the same rhythm as the knocking in the trunk, the same rhythm as the rain. Then a voice echoed in Elias's head. It didn't come from the creature. It had no mouth. It vibrated directly into his skull, a sound like grinding stones. "We are the Forgotten," Elias screamed. He twisted the key with all his strength, ignoring the grinding noise. Vroom. The engine roared to life. Elias didn't wait. He threw the car into gear and stomped on the gas. The tires spun, screaming on the wet asphalt, spraying water and gravel. The car lurched forward, swerving violently to the left to go around the figure. As he passed, he looked in the side mirror. The faceless man was gone. There was no one on the road, just the rain, slashing down in sheets. Elias drove. He drove fast, reckless, blind. He needed to get away from that face. He needed to find a town, a light, a person with eyes and a mouth. "I'm losing it," Elias sobbed, wiping tears and snot from his face. "I'm hallucinating. I need to wake up. Wake up, Elias." He slapped his own cheek, hard. The pain was real. The car was real. The rain was real. He looked at the dashboard. The clock was blinking, 0000. The gas gauge was on empty. The light was glowing angry orange. "No gas," he whispered. "How? I had half a tank." The car began to sputter. The engine coughed, losing power. The power steering grew heavy. No, not here. The Honda rolled to a stop. Silence returned, save for the rain. Elias sat in the dead car, staring out into the darkness. The headlights were dimming, turning a sickly yellow as the battery began to die. But ahead, in the distance, caught in the dying beam of his lights, was a sign. It was a standard yellow road sign, diamond-shaped. It was crooked, leaning precariously toward the road. Elias squinted. It was an accident sign, the silhouette of a car skidding with squiggly lines behind it. Accident zone ahead. Elias frowned. He had seen this sign before. He had passed this sign an hour ago, and the hour before that. He looked at the odometer. 199,999 miles. It clicked over. 200,000. And then, just past the sign, he saw the tree. It was a massive oak, split down the middle by lightning, standing on the curve of the road like a broken sentinel. Its bark was stripped away at the base. Elias knew that tree. A memory, sharp and violent as a shard of glass, pierced his brain. He remembered the rain. He remembered the hydroplane.
He remembered the scream of tires. He remembered the impact.
Chapter 10. The Dead Road Loop. The silence was absolute. The rain, which had been a deafening roar just seconds ago, simply ceased. It didn't taper off, it vanished, as if someone had cut the audio track on the world. The wind died. The trees stopped swaying. Even the ticking of the cooling engine block faded into a suffocating void. Elias sat in the driver's seat, his hands resting limply in his lap. The headlights were dead, but he could see. A pale, sourceless luminescence, like the glow of deep-sea phosphorescence, radiated from the mist that curled around the tires. He stared at the sign. Accident zone ahead. It was crooked, rusted, and riddled with bullet holes.
But it wasn't just familiar. It was intimate. He knew the specific pattern of rust on the bottom corner. He knew the angle of the lean. He looked at the odometer. 200,000. The numbers were frozen. "I know this place," Elias whispered. His voice sounded thin, tinny, like a recording played back on an old tape deck. He opened the door. It swung open without a creak, moving too smoothly, as if it had no weight. He stepped out onto the asphalt. He didn't feel the cold anymore. He didn't feel the dampness of his clothes. He felt static, a low-level vibration that hummed in his teeth. He walked past the sign. His boots made no sound on the wet road. Ahead lay the curve, and in the center of the curve stood the oak tree. It was a monstrous thing, ancient and gnarled, its bark stripped away in a massive, jagged scar near the base. The wood underneath was blackened, charred by fire and time. And wrapped around the base of the tree, fused to the wood like a metallic fungus, was a car. Elias stopped. It was a Honda Civic, or it had been once. Now it was a crushed accordion of steel and shattered glass. The roof was caved in, flattened almost to the door handles. The front end was obliterated, the engine block shoved back into the cabin. But it wasn't fresh. Vines thick as a man's wrist wound through the shattered windshield. Rust, thick and flaky, covered every inch of exposed metal. Moss grew in the wheel wells. This wreck had been here for a long time. Decades, maybe. Elias walked closer, drawn by a magnetic, morbid pull. He recognized the bumper sticker on the mangled trunk lid, barely visible through the grime. It was a faded flag decal. His decal. "No," he breathed. "No, that's impossible. I'm driving my car. My car is back there."
He turned around to point at his vehicle. The road behind him was empty. There was no Honda Civic idling on the shoulder. There were no tire tracks. There was only the mist and the endless looping road. Elias spun back to the wreck. He scrambled over the wet grass, falling to his knees beside the driver's side door. The window was gone. The interior was exposed to the elements. He looked inside. The driver's seat was pushed back, the mechanism snapped, and sitting there, strapped in by a frayed, moldy seatbelt, was a figure. It wasn't a body, not anymore. It was a collection of bones held together by the remnants of a flannel shirt and jeans. A skull rested against the headrest, jaw slack in an eternal scream. On the skeletal wrist, a watch glinted in the pale light, a silver watch with a cracked face. Elias looked at his own wrist. He was wearing the same watch. He looked at the skeleton's clothes. He was wearing the same flannel shirt. The realization hit him not with a bang, but with the crushing weight of a collapsing star. The knocking in the trunk? That was him, thrashing in the wreckage, pinned and dying, desperate to be heard. The call from his own number? That was his final thought, his brain firing its last desperate synapses, telling him not to turn around, not to look at the reality of his death. The faceless man? The reflection of his own identity, eroding as the years passed, and he became nothing more than a stain on the asphalt. The child crossing the road? He remembered now. It came back in a flood of jagged, searing images. The rain, the late night, the fatigue, the boy in the blue pajamas chasing a ball across the highway, the swerve, the hydroplane, the tree. He hadn't hit the child. He had swerved to save him. "I died," Elias whispered to the skull. "I died saving him." He looked at the registration sticker peeling off the shattered windshield of the wreck. October 2014. 10 years. He had been driving this loop for 10 years. Every night the rain started. Every night he picked up the hitchhiker, his own wandering soul. Every night he fled from the black car, the inevitability of the end. And every night he arrived here, at the tree, only to forget and start the engine again. "I want to go home," Elias sobbed, but he had no tears.
Please, let me go home." "You are home, Elias." The voice came from the wreck. It came from the trees. It came from the road itself. Elias looked up. The mist was clearing.
The black car, the Interceptor without a driver, was parked silently on the road just beyond the tree. Its door was open. It wasn't a Predator. It was a hearse. "No," Elias said, backing away. "I can fix this. I can drive back. I just need to find the gas station. I need to reset." He turned away from the wreck. He turned away from the black car. He looked down the road, back the way he came. And there, shimmering into existence out of the fog, was his Honda Civic. Pristine, engine idling, the headlights cutting through the gloom. It was waiting for him. "I can do it right this time," Elias lied to himself. The amnesia was already creeping in at the edges of his vision, soft and white like cotton. "I just need to stay awake. I just need to drive." He walked toward the car. With every step, the memory of the skeleton faded. The memory of the date faded. The horror of the faceless man smoothed over into a vague anxiety about the weather. He reached the car. He opened the door. The smell of stale coffee and pine air freshener welcomed him, a false comfort. He sat in the driver's seat. He gripped the wheel. "Just a little further," Elias muttered, rubbing his eyes. "Just need to get home." He put the car in gear. The odometer rolled over. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Rain began to patter against the windshield. Just a drizzle at first, then a steady drumbeat. Elias turned on the radio. Static filled the cabin. He drove forward, leaving the accident sign behind, unaware that a mile down the road, a girl in a yellow dress was waiting on the shoulder for a ride.